This video is sponsored by Reblum. Welcome back, this is Luca, and it's been 2 months since I purchased my Sony A7RVI that you see in my hands over here. Now, if you're new to the channel or if you haven't watched my first impression video, go watch that one over here because in that video I discuss about the ergonomics, I discuss about the new sensor, I discuss about all the things that are new to this camera, even compared to some of the predecessors, because I own also the Sony A7V and the Sony A7RVI. And again, there's a video comparing these three cameras to help you decide which one is best for you. But that video, it's not this one. In this video, I want to talk to you about my 2 months with this camera. Basically, ever since day one, I've been using this camera as my main camera for a lot of possible scenarios. Because in these 2 months, I've shot landscapes. Of course, this is one of the things that I do. And in that situation, the sheer dynamic range and resolution of this camera are just amazing. What you can get out of this camera is just phenomenal. Paired with the right lens, the resolution is just astonishing. And the dynamic range allows you to just recover shadows and highlights without any particular issue. It's a joy to use for landscape because once you push in, once you zoom in at 100%, you see a level of detail that is just mind-blowing. But I didn't use it for landscape alone. I also used it for a little bit of wildlife. I want to touch more on wildlife in a separate video because I haven't shot a lot of wildlife. There's one thing that I can tell already is that the autofocus is really, really good. And the ability that you have to punch in now that you can finally use the electronic shutter and 30 frames per second in a 67 megapixel camera without worrying too much about the rolling shutter is just something that is unheard of at this price point and with this amount of resolution. So it's something that opens up a lot of possibilities. For example, something that I'm thinking when it comes to wildlife is to selling my 200 to 600 and getting the brand new 100 to 400 just because with the amount of megapixel that I have, even if I use the APS-C crop mode, I still have 28 megapixel out of this camera, which is more than enough for my wildlife usage. So there's a lot of things that open up considering that now you can use the electronic shutter without any issue, and pre-capture, and the 30 frames per second, and all the things that I've already discussed in my first impression video. So even for wildlife, this camera is just phenomenal. I also used it for concert photography. Now, concerts, it's not something that I do a lot anymore. I was used to do a lot more of that, but when it comes to concert, most of the time, you don't need this amount of megapixel. The 33 megapixel that you get out of this A7V are usually more than enough for concert photography. And this is one of the gripes that I have with this camera is that even compared to the A7R5, that camera had a lower megapixel count resolution that you could use. Actually at two. One was very low, was 15 megapixel, but the other one was 26. And I am missing that because whenever I don't need the 67 megapixel, I kind of dread having to deal with these big of a file size for stuff that doesn't need it. So I really hope that in a future firmware upgrade, Sony can address that and give us, with this camera, a lower megapixel count raw image, because that would help a lot. You can do that with JPEG or HEIF files. You can't do that with raw files unless you're using the APS-C mode. But at that point, you're changing what the camera is doing. So Sony, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this video, if you're listening to what I'm saying, just please try to address that because it's really, really important. But besides all the things that I already mentioned, the one thing that I used this camera for the most is portraits, editorial sessions, models, stuff like that. I ended up being sucked into a vortex of photography in these 2 months. I've shot thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures in that scenario, and this camera has turned out being basically flawless. The one thing that is incredible is that this camera not only renders beautiful pictures, it renders very good dynamic range, it renders a lot of details, maybe too much, some would say, and it does it with very good colors and very good uh, depth of the image. It just doesn't miss. The focus never misses. I think I haven't missed any shot at all when it comes to autofocus because of the camera. It's just mind-blowing. Other cameras, other Sony cameras have been super good too, but this one seems to be on a whole other level. What you can get out of the pictures that you shoot with this camera in that scenario is just mind-blowing. It's sharp, never misses focus, very good dynamic range. It just, what is important for me is that in these scenarios, it never got in the way, and it's always been by my side to the point where you almost forget that you're using a tool. You just focus on what you need to do, and the camera is going to do what you're thinking. Because I built a level of trust with this camera that I have never built with any other camera besides probably the Fujifilm X-H2S back when it was launched, before they messed up with the firmwares and the camera became almost unusable. But at the beginning, the level of trust and feel that I got with that camera is something that I'm seeing with this one. And it's really weird for me to say, because usually I don't like shooting with Sony cameras, but this one has turned out being on another level. And when it comes to portraits, editorial sessions, stuff like that, it is really important that not only you nail the focus, not only you nail the editing, you also nail the treatment of the subject's skin. And this is where today's sponsor, Reblum, comes into place. So let's just go at my computer and see what this software is capable of, because it has become my standard when it comes to editing skin and making sure that my final image is perfect and it's ready to be delivered to my client. When you open the software, this is where you get to. It tells you immediately that even if it's AI driven, everything runs locally, so you don't have to worry about your files going around the world. So you shouldn't be worried about that at all. And if you want to open a file, you either drag and drop over here, or like I do, you click there and then choose all the files. Once you see them populating down here, you also see that the software is already applying some skin softening settings that are pre-loaded in the system. When once it's done, you're going to see it become green over here. Now, let's go see how this works. You have two tabs over here, all photos and this photo. All photos means that the settings that you're applying to this photo are going to be applied to all the photos that you have open together, while this photo means that you're only working with this photo. It's up to you. I usually work with batches of photo that come from the same shooting, so it makes sense that you work with one and then expect the same setting to go to the others. So I always leave it to all photos, but if you needed to separate them, you can do it. And also, if you work with all photos and then you want one photo to be different, you just go to the one photo that you want and then go to this photo, and it's only going to apply those settings to that photo. Back here, you have these sliders are what tells you how much your skin softening features are going to work. But before that, you have the natural and the fashion style, which basically are two starting point of skin retouching. The name is pretty self-explanatory. Natural is a more natural look and sets everything at 50%. Fashion brings everything up to 100%. And in my opinion, most of the time is a little bit too much. So I always start from natural and then move the sliders to adjust to what I need. The refine here gets you the possibility to split between the face and the body. I don't do that because I want the consistency, but you can. And this slider, which is basically the general, tells you how much of the skin smoothing you are applying. The shine remover we're going to see later. You also have this one over here that tells you the before and the after. And the tone balance basically balances the image a little bit more from a color standpoint. I usually don't touch it that often because I already come to the image when it's being processed already in my raw editing software, so I tend not to touch it, but if you need to, you have it there. You also have teeth whitening. We're going to see that later. And we also have the eyes, which are going to enhance your pupils depending on how much you move the slider. You also have the clean backdrop, but I tend not to use it that much because I try to have the backdrop already clean before I shoot, because that is something you can try to control. You also see that it's working pretty well, and I want it to be on natural over here. It works pretty well even on darker skins, which some of the softwares don't really do that much. Now, let's see the befores and the afters. Look at this area over here. The before shows a lot of almost white areas. The shine removal does exactly that. Look at this. Once I move the shine, it basically tones down those super bright areas. Now, you try to get those right while you're shooting, but sometimes you can't, and this tool works really well. Now, 100% is a little bit too much in this image, but around 66 or something like that is going to work really, really, really well. One thing that I wanted to show you also is the teeth whitening. You go here, and what it does with the teeth whitening is you bring it up and it makes them very bright. You bring them down and it makes them normal. In this case, you don't need teeth whitening at all because teeth are pretty wonderful already, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you need it, it's there. And one thing that I wanted to show you also is that even if you don't have a model, if you don't have those perfect skin of young people, this works really, really well, even on more seasoned faces. And in this specific case, while I like a lot the natural, this is one of those few moments where I like the fashion because it smoothens everything up, it brings the colors up, and I think what I'm getting right now with this specific picture works really, really, really well. The last thing that I wanted to show you is one of the things that for me is super important, and that is that this software, compared to other softwares, these also work on the skin, even if that is not on the face. Usually software recognize faces and work on the faces. In this case, this works also on the model's skin on the back. And look at this. You go from the original, which is this one, to this in basically nothing. And fashion is a little bit too much. Even with natural, it works incredibly well. Look at the before and the after. This would take a long time to edit if you're going one by one, if you're going manually. So this is a huge, huge, huge help. And it gets you that consistency that I was talking before. Then you can export. You have all the settings over here. You can choose the type of file. You can choose the quality. You can choose the naming. You can choose the path. You can choose everything that you want. You then export it, and the files are going to be ready. But also something that I wanted to show you is that this software is well integrated with Capture One, because this is the file, and if I want to edit, let's say I'm done with the editing and I want to do the last part, which is the skin retouching, you hit Reblum over here and it's going to open up Reblum. I don't do it photo by photo, I do it in batches like this. You click on the right, edit with Reblum. You choose all the settings, TIFF, 16-bit, everything that you need, edit variants, and it's gonna open up in Reblum after it's done over here. You see it here, it's opening up, it's populating down here, and then from here you can work, and then you can export, and it's gonna go back to Capture One in this case. But it also works on Lightroom, and I don't know if there's any other software that is working with. Now, if you like what you see and you want to try Reblum for yourself, they are kind enough to offer a 1 week, let's just say, test drive, and then you can purchase your yearly plan or your lifetime plan, and these are the pricing. This is $11.95 per month, but it's billed yearly, and the lifetime is $249. In any case, Reblum was kind enough to get my viewers a 20% discount if you look at the link in the description below. So if you decide that you want to purchase Reblum, just go to that link and save 20% off either on your yearly plan or on your lifetime plan. And now, back to the camera. I've also shot some video here and there, but this has not been my main thing, at least in these 2 months. So I don't have something challenging that I've done with this camera when it comes to video. So I can't speak that much about what this camera is capable of, because you know already that this camera is incredible for video as well. I've used it for YouTube, I've used it for other stuff, but all modern cameras are good for YouTube, so that's not a real test. I would like to test it for a specific project that I'm working on, and I hope to be able to bring it on the channel soon, just to push the boundaries of what I can do with this camera and what this camera can do. It is also interesting to know that the speculation is that this camera and the FX5, the brand new FX5, the new cinema camera that Sony has launched, basically share the same sensor and basically share the same video architecture that the FX5 has. So the 5K downsample to 4K is basically the same between the FX5 and the A7R6. It looks like, at least. This opens up a possibility that I'm thinking, that is, once the H.265 codec is going to come in open gate for the FX5, it is likely, and it's not likely, it is possible that this A7R6 with a firmware upgrade could get the open gate. Now, I don't think this camera is ever going to get internal RAW. Sony will probably never do this, but once they develop and once they optimize the H.265 codec for the FX5 in open gate, I believe that can be ported to the Alpha system with this camera, specifically just because they share the same video architecture. But we'll see, it's just a speculation. In conclusion, these 2 months have cemented my impressions that I had in my first video. This camera is just phenomenal. Is probably is the best professional tool that I've ever used, and it's not even close. I mean, the A7 V is great, the A7R5 was great, the XH2S was great, but this camera is on a whole other level. Because besides not getting in the way, besides being invisible, not physically, it's a pretty chunky boy, especially with the lens that I'm using, but besides being invisible to me because I can focus on what I'm shooting and I don't have to worry about anything else, it has changed my approach to using a Sony camera. Because in this channel, I've been saying all the time that I use the Sony cameras for professional stuff because they give me the results, but I don't enjoy using them. This camera, despite being really similar when it comes to the handling, the button layout, and everything that you get, for whatever reason, is drawing me more into using Sony even when I don't need to deliver a specific result, even when I'm shooting mostly for myself, because I can trust that it's never going to miss focus. The dynamic range is outstanding. The colors are really good. The rendering to high ISO, it is really good. Now, we need to be clear on something. Of course, 67 megapixels are a lot on a full-frame sensor, and so if you're zooming in at 100%, you are going to see noise. Once you go up to 3200, 6400 and stuff like that, you will see noise. That noise, however, is easy to work with, and also that high megapixel sensor allows you to, when you're seeing the image at the size that you want to see it, let's say you're printing it or you're seeing it on a computer on a 4K screen, you're basically not zooming in that much. So that noise basically disappears because the image is so big that it gets shrunk down to fit the frame that you're using. I hope that I was clear with what I'm saying, but the reality is, when we talk about noise, we tend to compare low megapixel and high megapixel sensor zooming in at 100%. The problem is, when you're going at 100% on a high megapixel sensor, you're zooming in by a lot more, like you're going way more in details. And if you had the chance to zoom out and basically look at the same crop that you're cropping with a low megapixel sensor, in reality, the noise is not going to be that much different. That's what I was trying to say. So, in conclusion, I am not saying that everyone should go and buy this camera because it's very expensive. The fact that this camera that costs almost 5,000 euros or 4,000 and something dollars, the fact that this camera is really good, it should be for that price point. It should be. But what this camera does, it breaks the boundaries of what high megapixel cameras could do, because it's now a camera that you can use as an all-arounder without any particular issue. And if you think about what this means, it means that now you can get, with one camera, you can do everything you wanted to do in the past, but you needed to have different cameras for. You had the low light camera, you had the sports camera, you had the high megapixel camera, and all those needed to be combined in a way that one was the backup of the other, but you couldn't do everything with one camera. With the A7R6, you can finally do it. Of course, it's not going to be as fast as the A1 Mark II or the A9 Mark III, but it's going to be fast enough for the vast majority of people when it comes to wildlife or sports. And at the same time, it's going to be incredibly good for video. It's going to be incredibly good for landscape photography where high megapixel matter. It's just an incredible camera. Now, enough with me yapping. I think I delivered the message that I wanted to deliver. This camera is just great. And this is not going to be my last video on this camera. I want to go section by section, discuss the single use case a little bit more. So stay tuned and subscribe, because more videos are going to come. I'm going to bring this camera with me in my upcoming vacation, and I want to do a lot of landscape photography, a lot of, if possible, wildlife. So I'm going to come back with a lot of shots that we're going to discuss. That was it for today. Ciao, grazie, and I'll see you in the next one.